We walk on the ground every day without thinking about it, but in some places on the planet the ground doesn't stay still. It sinks, collapses, cracks open, swallows entire villages, and moves, swallowing everything in its path. So, for today's video, join me as I count down 15 places on Earth where the ground is still moving. Number 15, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Back in 1962, Centralia was a quiet little coal mining community in the anthracite region of eastern Pennsylvania. Roughly 1,000 people called this town home, and it sat right above one of the richest coal deposits across the United States. Mining had been the heartbeat of this town since the middle of the 1800s, and everyone expected coal production would keep going for many more decades. Then workers set fire to the town landfill, a routine controlled burn meant to clear trash. Unfortunately, this dump sat directly over an exposed coal seam. The fire quickly spread underground, working its way into coal layers, old mine workings, and the vast web of tunnels, shafts, and seams woven through the rock beneath Centralia. There was so much coal down there that this blaze had enough fuel to keep burning for another 200 years. This underground fire has now raged for more than 60 years. Geological assessments predict it will keep burning until every last bit of coal is gone. Given just how large this deposit is, that could stretch all the way to the year 2260. Little by little, the fire has eaten away at the whole town. In certain spots, subsurface temperatures climb higher than 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and toxic fumes including carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide seep out into the open air. You can see the evidence right on the surface. Steam and smoke billow out from ground fissures. This effect stands out most in winter, when hot underground gases hit cold outdoor air and form thick, visible plumes. Route 61, the major highway that once cut through town, developed buckles and deep cracks as the ground underneath heated up and warped, until stretches of the road became completely impassable. That broken, abandoned section of Route 61 has become one of the most photographed roadways in America, and it stands as the iconic visual symbol of Centralia's slow, fiery demise. The local population has fallen from around 1,000 residents to fewer than 5 people. During the 1980s and 1990s, state and federal authorities bought out most homeowners, condemned their properties, and relocated families to safer locations. A small number of locals chose not to leave. A court settlement allowed them to remain in their houses for the rest of their lives. A church building still stands among overgrown streets. Beneath everything, that fire first lit in 1962 continues to burn out of sight. It burns with a slow persistence that will outlive every single person alive today by roughly 2 centuries. Number 14, the Dead Sea shoreline, Israel and Jordan. The Dead Sea is fading away. It holds the title of Earth's lowest lying body of water, with its surface sitting about 430 meters below sea level. Its water is so extremely salty that almost no life can survive within it. Israel, Jordan, and the West Bank all share its shorelines. For decades, the water body has kept shrinking, losing approximately 1 meter of water level every single year. Since the 1960s, its water level has dropped by around 40 meters, and this downward trend shows no signs of slowing down. This retreating waterline alone is already quite dramatic. Beaches that sat right along the water 30 years ago are now kilometers away from the shoreline. Resorts, health spas, and tourist facilities built along the waterfront back in the 80s and 90s now sit stranded on dry land. But the shrinking waters have triggered a secondary hazard, one far more dangerous, unpredictable, and frightening than a receding shore: sinkholes. Since the 1980s, more than 6,000 sinkholes have opened up along the Dead Sea coast, and new ones keep appearing at a rate of somewhere between 300 and 700 every year. These sinkholes form as falling water levels expose underground salt layers that water once kept stable and dissolved. As the sea pulls back, fresh groundwater flows toward those salt deposits, dissolves them, and leaves empty underground cavities behind. Dead Sea sinkholes have swallowed roads, parking lots, date palm groves, and farmland. They range from small, shallow depressions up to massive craters, dozens of meters wide and equally deep. There is no reliable method to forecast exactly where or when the next hole will tear open. Large stretches of the Dead Sea shore are effectively off-limits, too risky for any new construction. These sinkholes are essentially a geological side effect of human choices. Countries sharing this basin diverted water feeding the Dead Sea for other uses they viewed as higher priority than maintaining the lake's water height. The ground, stabilized by that water for thousands of years, is now reacting to its removal. The Dead Sea keeps shrinking, and sinkholes keep opening. This coastline ranks among the most geologically unstable land surfaces anywhere on our planet. Ground here shifts, collapses, and consumes everything built under the assumption that the Dead Sea would always remain in place. Number 13, the Sidoarjo mud volcano in East Java, Indonesia. On May 29, 2006, within the Parong subdistrict of East Java, a densely populated industrial zone, a mud volcano broke out. This was not a short, violent explosion. Instead, hot, gray, boiling mud began flowing nonstop, seemingly with no end. 18 years later, that mud still flows. Roughly 100,000 cubic meters of mud pour out every single day. It keeps surging from its vent, spreading outward across the landscape, burying whatever lies in its way, with no clear sign of slowing down or stopping. Experts still debate what set this event in motion. The disagreement remains one of Indonesia's most heated scientific and legal disputes. One widely discussed theory points to drilling work carried out by gas exploration firm PT Lapindo Brantas. At the time the mud first emerged, the company was operating a well only about 200 meters away from the eruption site. According to this view, drilling pierced an underground pocket of pressurized mud trapped beneath solid rock, unleashing it onto the surface in an uncontrolled outflow. A competing explanation blames a magnitude 6.3 earthquake that struck central Java 2 days before the mud started rising on May 27, 2006. The earthquake may have fractured subsurface rock layers and freed the trapped mud. Indonesian courts have sided with the earthquake-related explanation. Critics argue this ruling was influenced by political connections belonging to the drilling company's owners. No matter what triggered the disaster, the outcomes have been devastating. Mud has buried 12 villages, displaced close to 40,000 local residents, and destroyed houses, mosques, schools, and factories. Before 2006, this area was home to thriving communities and productive land. Many displaced families have lived in temporary housing for 18 years. Some have received compensation payments, while many others have not. Day after day, 100,000 cubic meters of mud keeps expanding across the land. A stark reminder that the ground we walk on is not always as solid, stable, or permanent as we tend to believe. Number 12. The Bayou Corne Sinkhole, Louisiana. On August 3, 2012, within the small community of Bayou Corne in Assumption Parish, Louisiana, deep inside the Mississippi Delta's swamp country, among cypress wetlands and sugarcane fields, a sinkhole suddenly opened. It did not develop slowly over time. The ground simply gave way all at once. What formed eventually grew to cover more than 37 acres. Trees, swamp water, and large sections of terrain vanished into it, and cameras captured its fast, violent expansion. This event produced some of the most dramatic, unsettling geological footage ever recorded. The root cause was a failed salt dome cavern, an underground hollow created through salt mining operations run by the Texas Brine Company. The firm practiced solution mining for salt. Workers pumped water down into a buried salt dome to dissolve salt deposits, then brought the salt-heavy brine back up to ground level. The rock wall separating the cavern from surrounding sediment failed. The ground sitting above that empty void collapsed inward, forming the sinkhole, which rapidly expanded over the following days, weeks, and months. The recorded footage is absolutely striking. Trees standing right at the hole's edge get pulled underground within seconds. Tall, mature cypress trees stand upright one moment and disappear completely the next. Water from the surrounding bayou rushed into the sinkhole, creating whirlpool-like currents that dragged debris, plant life, and other material into the ever-growing cavity. These videos spread widely online, becoming one of YouTube's most watched geological disaster clips. It offers real-world proof of what happens when what you think is solid ground is really just a thin crust sitting over an empty space waiting to give way. Bayou Corne residents had to evacuate. Around 350 people left their homes, many for good, as the sinkhole spread and nearby ground turned unstable. Texas Brine faced lawsuits and eventually reached settlement agreements. The sinkhole itself has stabilized, yet it cannot truly be repaired. You cannot easily mend a 37-acre hole in the earth. It remains a lasting scar across this landscape, a warning that southern Louisiana ground is far from firm. It consists largely of salt, water, mud, and hidden caverns, and it can shift whenever geological conditions allow. Number 11. Grindavik, Iceland. In November 2023, residents of Grindavik, a small fishing town of roughly 3,800 people located just 50 kilometers from Reykjavik, were evacuated from their homes. A swarm of earthquakes indicated magma was rising underneath the settlement, and a volcanic eruption appeared imminent. Within several weeks, those predictions came true. A volcanic fissure tore open across the peninsula, and lava began flowing across the land. This was not a one-off event. It marked the start of a string of eruptions that continued through 2024 and 2025. Fissures keep opening across the region, and lava flows across farmland and threatens local infrastructure. The most powerful visuals from Grindavik do not show lava. They show the ground itself. Before eruptions even began, magma pushing upward beneath the peninsula fractured the land surface. These were not tiny hairline cracks. Massive fissures split roads wide apart and tore parking lots to pieces. Photos and drone footage capture shattered streets, ripped up asphalt, houses with cracks running straight from their foundations all the way up through their roof lines, and visible separations spreading across ground under the town. These shots rank among the most remarkable visual documentation of volcanic ground deformation ever captured in a populated area. Iceland sits atop the mid-Atlantic ridge. This marks the boundary dividing the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates. From a geological standpoint, the whole island is an active construction zone. The two plates pull apart roughly 2 centimeters each year. Magma rising up from Earth's mantle fills that gap, forming brand new rock and land and driving volcanic activity. The peninsula holding Grindavik stayed volcanically quiet for around 800 years before this current eruptive cycle kicked off in 2021. Geologists believe the area has entered a fresh active phase that could carry on for decades. Local residents face an almost impossible question. Should they move back home? Buildings and town infrastructure are still physically present. Yet the ground beneath Grindavik is cracked and unstable, sitting above a magma system that has already erupted multiple times over the past 2 years. Every geologist studying this area agrees further eruptions will definitely occur. Grindavik is a town whose ground has already shifted, and everyone living there understands it will shift again. Number 10. Kiruna, Sweden. Kiruna stands as Sweden's northernmost city. It is a mining community home to approximately 23,000 residents, located north of the Arctic Circle. Founded back in 1900 to support a huge iron ore mine, this site hosts one of the world's largest, most productive iron ore operations. For more than a century, the mine formed Kiruna's economic backbone, delivering jobs, income, and the very reason this city exists. Now that same mine is slowly destroying the town, with full cooperation from the mining corporation and government authorities. Iron ore lying underneath Kiruna carries greater value than the city built above it. This is an underground mine. Miners extract ore deep below ground through an extensive network of tunnels and shafts. Decades of mining have expanded excavated zones underneath the city, and the land sitting above these empty spaces has begun subsiding, sinking, and cracking. This subsidence does not unfold as sudden catastrophe. It happens gradually and can be precisely measured, yet it never stops. The sinking zone creeps toward the city center at a rate that makes normal long-term habitation impossible. The solution is quite extraordinary. Move the entire city. Not just individual buildings, but the whole settlement. Sweden's government, together with mining company LKAB, is relocating Kiruna, including buildings, public infrastructure, and the whole community, about 3 kilometers toward the east from its original location. This large-scale relocation has been underway since the 2010s and will keep going for many decades ahead. Whole city blocks get taken apart, transported, and reassembled on the new site. Important landmark structures, among them the famous Kiruna Church, a wooden building completed in 1912 and once voted Sweden's most beautiful building, have already been relocated or are scheduled for transfer to the new town area. Kiruna is no ghost town. It is not abandoned. People still live and work here. This inhabited city is literally being lifted and shifted elsewhere because the mine the town depends on for survival is eating away the ground underneath it. The mine is destroying Kiruna, yet the mine also pays for Kiruna's relocation. This arrangement feels surreal and deeply strange all at once. The city moves because of mining operations, yet it will keep existing in its new position, funded by mining revenue as long as iron ore deposits hold out. Given the size of those reserves, that could easily last another 100 years. Kiruna is a city truly on the move, permanently. Number 9, Mexico City. Mexico City is sinking. This is not some tiny, barely detectable shift, nor just a theoretical long-term geological process. Parts of Mexico City sink as fast as 50 centimeters every year. In the worst-hit neighborhoods, subsidence reaches around 20 inches annually. That makes it one of the fastest sinking major cities across the globe. Visibly obvious consequences show up in photographs: tilted buildings, fractured walls, and warped roadways. Groundwater extraction is causing this sinking. Mexico City occupies the basin of an ancient lake. This very lake was where the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan stood, until Spanish conquerors drained large parts of it after taking the city in 1521. That old lake bed consists of soft, easily compressed clay, thousands of years' worth of fine sediment once saturated with lake water. Since the 1800s, people have continuously pumped water out of the aquifer underneath this clay layer. As groundwater gets removed, the clay loses the moisture holding its structure intact and compresses under its own weight. It works much like a sponge being steadily squeezed. Buildings, streets, and infrastructure resting on top sink downward along with it. You can observe these consequences everywhere you go. The Palace of Fine Arts, one of Mexico City's most iconic landmarks, is a heavy marble and steel Art Nouveau building finished in 1934. It has sunk roughly 2 meters since construction wrapped up. Its main entrance once sat level with the street, and now you need to walk down several steps to reach it. The Metropolitan Cathedral, the largest cathedral across the Americas, erected between 1573 and 1813 over an old Aztec temple site, has sunk unevenly. One side settles noticeably lower than the other, creating a clear visual tilt. Road surfaces crack, water mains rupture, sewer pipes fracture. Critical infrastructure built for 21 million residents, designed under the assumption that ground would stay fixed in place, keeps failing, bringing huge ongoing repair costs as the ground shifts beneath the metropolis. Mexico City cannot halt subsidence unless it stops pulling water from its aquifer. Yet it cannot stop drawing that groundwater without securing alternative water sources for its 21 million strong population. Roughly 70% of the city's water supply comes straight from that same shrinking aquifer driving the sinking. One of our planet's biggest, most culturally vibrant urban centers keeps sinking relentlessly down into soft clay. That same clay supported the Aztec capital 6 centuries ago, and modern-day Mexico City keeps squeezing it flat, with effects that cannot easily be reversed. Number 8, Campi Flegrei, Naples. Campi Flegrei is a supervolcano, not just an ordinary volcano. Its potential eruptions are defined not by ash columns or lava flows, but by planet-altering, climate-shattering blasts. Multiple times throughout Earth's history, eruptions here reshaped large sections of our planet's surface and pushed species close to total extinction. Campi Flegrei sits right west of Naples, Italy's third largest city, home to about 3 million people. Around 500,000 individuals live directly on top of this volcanic caldera. Ground at Campi Flegrei keeps moving. This ground movement has persisted for decades, rising and falling in a pattern called bradyseism, a term originating from Greek words meaning slow movement. These shifts reflect activity within the magma chamber sitting underground. Since the 1980s, ground at the caldera's center has risen by more than 2 meters. This uplift does not advance at a steady pace. It speeds up and slows down, sometimes pausing for multiple years before resuming again. One of the clearest pieces of evidence for ground movement can be seen at the Temple of Serapis, an old Roman market building. Marble columns still bear marks left by marine shell-boring creatures. These holes sit far higher than today's ground level, confirming this building was submerged under seawater at least once across the past 2,000 years. A critical question still lacks definitive answers. 500,000 people living atop the caldera desperately want resolved. Is today's ongoing uplift building toward a volcanic eruption? Campi Flegrei last erupted in 1538. That event was relatively moderate, creating the Monte Nuovo cinder cone, literally new mountain, all within a single week. Its last major eruption took place roughly 15,000 years ago. Its most catastrophic explosion happened around 40,000 years ago. That blast ejected an estimated 300 cubic kilometers of material, and many researchers believe it contributed to Neanderthal decline across Europe. An eruption of that magnitude in modern times would rank among humanity's most devastating natural disasters. Number 7, Jakarta, in Indonesia. Jakarta sinks faster than any other large city on Earth. Parts of this sprawling, densely populated capital, home to more than 10 million city residents and 35 million across its metro area, have dropped by as much as 4 meters over the last 20 years. North Jakarta, the lowest-lying district bordering the Java Sea, now lies below sea level. Only a seawall shields it, and that seawall itself keeps sinking and cracking. The root cause closely mirrors what we see in Mexico City: excessive groundwater pumping. Over the past 50 years, local population exploded, growing from roughly 3 million in the 1960s to over 10 million now. The city's public piped water network only serves a small share of inhabitants. Most households and businesses rely on private wells pulling groundwater straight out of the city's underlying aquifer. Unregulated, heavy-volume extraction far outpaces how fast the aquifer can naturally refill itself. As a result, overlying ground collapses downward. The Indonesian government took drastic, extremely costly action in response. Back in 2019, President Joko Widodo announced Indonesia would move its national capital away from Jakarta. A brand new purpose-built city named Nusantara would rise on the island of Borneo, around 2,000 kilometers away. Multiple concerns drove this decision: chronic sinking, regular flooding, terrible traffic, and severe overcrowding. Still, rapid land subsidence received the most public attention. Relocating an entire national capital represents an undertaking of almost unimaginable scale and expense. Estimated total costs exceed $35 billion. The project has run into delays, funding shortfalls, plus widespread doubt whether Nusantara will ever get fully finished as planned. The simple fact that government officials concluded constructing a brand new capital on a separate island was more practical than fixing Jakarta tells you just how severe Jakarta's sinking crisis truly is. Number 6. Siberian permafrost in Russia. Permafrost means permanently frozen ground. It underlies roughly 65% of Russia's land territory and has stayed continuously frozen for tens of thousands of years. Right now, that permafrost is melting. This is not some distant hypothetical future risk. Melting is happening today, plainly visible and measurable. Across Siberia, thawing permafrost triggers ground collapse. Sudden craters burst open across the tundra. Methane gas trapped within frozen ground for 40,000 years explodes outward, swallowing stretches of landscape. Some of these craters stretch hundreds of feet, both wide and deep. They appear completely without warning. Local inhabitants describe their formation as sounding like large explosions. What remains behind looks very much like meteorite impact sites. This thaw inflicts massive damage to local infrastructure. Buildings in Siberian towns rest on support piles driven deep down into permafrost. Those piles lock securely into frozen ground to create stable foundations. Once permafrost thaws, piles lose their firm anchor. Formerly frozen ground turns into mud. Buildings above tilt, crack, and in some instances collapse entirely. Road surfaces buckle, airport runways warp, and oil and gas pipelines shift, crack, and leak as supporting ground moves. Methane release represents the most far-reaching consequence of permafrost thaw. Permafrost stores approximately 1.5 trillion tons of organic carbon, roughly double the total carbon present in our atmosphere today. When permafrost thaws, organic material decomposes and releases methane gas. Released methane warms global atmosphere further. Extra warmth melts even more permafrost, which then releases still more methane. This creates a dangerous self-reinforcing feedback loop. Ground in Siberia does not merely shift physically, it unlocks a carbon reservoir kept frozen for 40,000 years. Once this carbon escapes, no existing human technology can recapture or contain it. Number 5. The Great Rift Valley of East Africa. The African continent is actively splitting apart. This is not guesswork or theoretical prediction. Satellite GPS measurements confirm this process is unfolding right now. Along the East African Rift, land separates at roughly 6 to 7 millimeters each year. This 3,000-kilometer-long crack runs across Earth's crust, stretching from the Afar Triangle in Ethiopia all the way south to Mozambique. Within about 5 to 10 million years, it will split off the eastern section of Africa, known as the Somali Plate, away from the rest of the continent. A brand new ocean basin will occupy where the Rift Valley sits today. Back in 2005, this ongoing geological process produced one of modern history's most striking events. In Ethiopia's Afar region, one of Earth's most tectonically active zones, a huge ground crack formed. It stretched 56 kilometers long, up to 8 meters wide, and 60 meters deep. All of this opened within just 10 days. Geologically speaking, that is practically the blink of an eye. Magma injecting itself into subsurface fractures caused this massive split. The Great Rift Valley forms a long, deep, steep-sided valley cutting through some of Africa's most famous landscapes. It covers the Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater, Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika, plus volcanic peaks Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya. Do not picture it as just a simple crack in sand. It is a broad, complex, geologically active zone full of volcanoes, hot springs, and fault lines where two sections of continent keep slowly pulling away from one another. The rift generates new land. Eruptions along its length create fresh rock-filling gaps as plates drift apart. The East African Rift is Earth's only location where we can watch a continent actively tear itself apart. This type of event has occurred many times across geological history. This exact process formed the Atlantic Ocean, when Africa and South America separated roughly 130 million years ago. But right now, it unfolds in real time. Satellites track its movements, and geologists closely study every change. Ground here has been shifting for 25 million years, and it will keep moving until the continent fully splits and ocean water fills the resulting gap. For human lifespans, that event lies unimaginably far in the future. From a geological perspective, though, that transformation is already well underway. Number 4, the San Andreas Fault in California. The San Andreas Fault ranks as the world's most famous geological fault line. This 800-mile-long fracture cuts through Earth's crust running nearly the full length of California, from the Salton Sea in the south up to Cape Mendocino in the north. The Pacific Plate and North American Plate slide alongside each other here, averaging roughly 46 millimeters of movement every year, about as fast as human fingernails grow. Friction between these plates generates earthquakes. These quakes have shaped California's history, building codes, and local collective outlook ever since the state came into existence. The fault is more than a single crack. It forms an entire system of fractures and secondary fault branches, in some places spreading across a zone as wide as 10 miles. Movement does not happen smoothly and continuously. Rock surfaces lock together, friction holding plates stationary. Tectonic driving forces keep building elastic energy stored within rock. Energy accumulates over years, decades, and centuries. Eventually, friction cannot hold back the strain. Plates jolt past each other, releasing all that stored energy in an earthquake. The last major rupture along the southern San Andreas took place in 1857, the Fort Tejon earthquake. Estimated magnitude 7.9, it tore along about 220 miles of fault, displacing ground up to 9 meters. The northern San Andreas's last big rupture struck in 1906, the San Francisco earthquake. At magnitude 7.9, it destroyed large portions of the city and remains one of America's most devastating natural disasters. The fault's southern segment has not had a major rupture in more than 160 years. The longer we wait between ruptures, the more energy builds up, meaning the eventual earthquake will be more powerful. Los Angeles sits on the Pacific plate side, San Francisco rests on the North American plate side. They drift toward each other 46 millimeters annually. In roughly 15 million years, they will sit right next to each other. In our present era, the fault keeps stockpiling seismic energy. 40 million Californians live atop crust that is always slowly shifting. Residents understand the next major earthquake is not a question of if, but when. Number 3. Christchurch, New Zealand. On February 22, 2011, local time, a magnitude 6.2 earthquake hit Christchurch on New Zealand's South Island. Solid ground turned liquid. This phenomenon is soil liquefaction. During shaking, water-saturated, loosely packed soil loses its structural strength. It temporarily behaves like fluid rather than firm, solid ground. Earthquake agitation pushes soil grains apart and forces water between them. Ground that moments before supported buildings and roads turns into thick, gray, porridge-like mud, unable to bear weight. Liquefaction caused terrible destruction across Christchurch. Whole neighborhoods sank. Cars disappeared into the earth. Silt and mud erupted upward through cracks in pavement, lawns, and house floors. Muddy, slurry geysers burst out, flooding streets and properties under heavy, hard-to-remove liquefied soil. Eastern suburbs received the worst damage. Houses tilted, foundations split, road surfaces buckled and dropped to lower elevations. In the aftermath, authorities carried out a full-scale reckoning. Officials assessed which land areas could safely be rebuilt and which could not. New Zealand officials created a land zoning system. Green zones permitted reconstruction. Orange zones required further technical assessment. Red zones meant land was too damaged, unstable and prone to failure for habitation. Roughly 8,000 residential properties landed in red zone status. Government-compensated owners and buildings were demolished. Large sections of eastern Christchurch turned into empty grass-covered land, areas that used to be busy suburbs before 2011. Since then, substantial rebuilding has taken place. Newly constructed buildings built to modern safety standards have replaced most of the ruined central business district. The city rebuilt itself with resilience and creativity, winning international respect. Red zone sites still remain, quiet, grassy, empty patches across eastern suburbs. Ground in Christchurch is stable again. Yet the memory of that day when Earth lost its solidity, when streets sank and mud erupted out of the ground, is deeply embedded within local identity and modern building regulations. Number 2. Tokyo, Japan. Tokyo sits within the world's most seismically active major urban area. Around 1,500 detectable earthquakes shake this city each year. That averages more than 4 tremors every single day. Local residents live with constant seismic awareness woven into daily life. It shows up in earthquake-resistant building designs for homes and offices, emergency supply kits people keep indoors, and the nationwide early warning system sending instant alerts to every mobile phone across the city. This extreme seismic activity comes down to geography. Tokyo lies near the junction point of 3 tectonic plates: the Pacific Plate, Philippine Sea Plate, and Eurasian Plate. These plates subduct, collide, and grind against one another within a complex network of faults and fracture zones. This generates near-constant seismic activity. Events range from tiny, unnoticeable microtremors occurring daily to moderate quakes several times per year and major destructive earthquakes roughly once every generation, events that have historically devastated the city and reshaped its land. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, magnitude 7.9, struck September 1st. It ranks among Japan's most destructive quakes in history. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake, magnitude 9, centered offshore about 370 kilometers northeast of Tokyo, was the strongest earthquake ever recorded within Japan. Tokyo survived both disasters. The city rebuilt completely after 1923 and weathered 2011 with mostly intact structures. Its survival stands as testament to Japanese engineering skill, emergency preparation, and centuries' worth of adaptation to living with earthquake risk. Tokyo's buildings are among the planet's most earthquake-resistant structures. They are engineered to flex rather than fracture, dissipating seismic energy through base isolation systems and built-in dampers. Tokyo Skytree, the world's tallest tower at 634 meters, uses a central concrete shaft and separate outer steel frame. These two components can shift independently during earthquakes, counterbalancing one another's movement and cutting overall sway. Its engineering is truly remarkable. This tower rises on ground shaking 4 times daily, built to endure earthquake events most other cities would never recover from. Ground underneath Tokyo keeps moving, tectonic plates keep shifting. 37 million people across its wider metro area, Earth's largest urban population center, build homes, infrastructure, and local culture, knowing their ground is not unchanging. Tokyo does not ignore earthquakes, nor pretend they will stop happening. The city builds for them, prepares for them, and lives alongside them 4 times each day. All of this sits atop crust that has shaken for millions of years, and will keep shaking millions more years into the future. Number 1, Venice, Italy. Venice is sinking. It sinks slowly and steadily, with patience matching the rising waters surrounding it. Back in the 5th century, builders founded this city on millions of wooden support piles driven deep into lagoon mud along Italy's northeast coast. For more than 1,500 years, those piles held firm, supporting palaces, churches, bridges, and public squares. Now those piles are sinking. Mud underneath compresses, and surrounding seawater levels climb higher. Venice has sunk roughly 23 centimeters over the past century. This subsidence comes from 2 factors: natural sediment compression plus human-caused groundwater extraction from aquifers under the lagoon. Authorities banned groundwater pumping back in the 1970s, yet massive irreversible sinking had already occurred before that ban took effect. Today, the city subsides around 1 to 2 millimeters each year. That number sounds insignificant until combined with sea level rise in the Adriatic Sea of roughly 2.5 millimeters annually. Together, they create relative sea level rise adding up to 4 to 5 millimeters per year. Acqua Alta, the high water flooding events, regularly submerge St. Mark's Square. Floodwaters enter ground floors of houses and businesses. Venice residents navigate their own city by walking on raised wooden boardwalks. Over the last 100 years, these serious flood events have grown dramatically more frequent. Between 1870 and 1949, only 30 high tides exceeded 110 centimeters, the threshold for major flooding. Between 2015 and 2024 alone, St. Mark's Square recorded 76 such high tide incidents. Now the square floods approximately 250 times every single year. Authorities built the most expensive flood defense system ever constructed to fight this threat: MOSE, short for Modulo Sperimentale Elettromeccanico. 78 movable flood barriers sit within the 3 inlets connecting Venice Lagoon out toward the Adriatic Sea. Plans originated in the 1980s, official approval arrived in the 2000s, and construction finished in 2020 at a total cost of roughly $7 billion. Deploying the whole system takes roughly 30 minutes, and it can shield Venice against tides up to 3 meters high. These barriers are hinged onto the seafloor. They lie flat underwater when not needed. Compressed air inflates and lifts them upward whenever dangerous high tides approach the city. From October 2023 through April 2024, operators activated MOSE barriers 31 times, about once every 6 days, to stop flooding that otherwise would have submerged large city sections. MOSE works for now. But engineers originally designed this system for an era when severe high tides were rare occurrences, with events happening just a few times annually and requiring barriers to operate for only a handful of hours each activation. Current real-world conditions, with 31 activations across 6 months and a frequency trending upward year after year, push the system toward usage rates its designers never anticipated. Venice faces pressure from 2 directions at once. Ground sinks downward from underneath, and floodwaters press upward from above. The narrow space this city has occupied for 1,500 years keeps shrinking. MOSE barriers hold back water, protective glass barriers around St. Mark's stand firm, pumps keep running, and temporary boardwalks are deployed. Venetian people have fought against water for 1,500 years. They built a whole civilization on wooden piles set inside a lagoon. They remain here, living their lives and continuing to fight, holding fast to the belief Venice will survive. No engineering project can completely reverse the city's ongoing sinking rate. That $7 billion barrier system meant to save Venice now gets activated 31 times within 6 months, and this cycle keeps accelerating. Venice ranks among our world's most beautiful cities, yet it also stands as one of the most endangered. Questions linger. Will its wooden piles hold strong? Will flood barriers keep functioning? Will surrounding ocean water keep rising? These represent some of the most urgent, heartbreaking engineering questions humanity faces. They force us to examine how human civilizations relate to the planet we build upon. Venice keeps sinking. The ground that cradled this magnificent city for 1,500 years shifts slowly and steadily downward. And with that same quiet persistence, the surrounding water advances. And for all of Venice's beauty, rich history, and multi-billion-dollar flood barriers, the city may not be able to keep up.